Hello everyone, my name is Erin, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at some predictions, tips and tricks for the Politics and Society exam in 2026.
Just a quick disclaimer before we begin. These predictions are not guaranteed to come up, so make sure to cover every topic on the course before the exams. These predictions are based off evidence from previous exam years and from predictions given to us by expert teachers. Now, enjoy the video.
First of all, let's take a look at the SAQs, or the short answer questions. You have 18 minutes to answer the short answer questions. These are worth 50 marks in total, which are 10% of the subject grade. There are 15 questions, but you must answer 10 of them. So you have a bit of choice. There's 5 questions you can leave out there. These are generally relatively straightforward, but here are some tips to help you achieve maximum marks. So write short and concise answers, use critical thinking for the general politics questions, and then use a good definitions book to help prepare for the rest. If a question is concise and objective, for example, what are 2 functions of the ECHR, and you know the 2 functions of the ECHR, then attempt these types of questions first. If the question is very general and subjective, so for example, what does this picture say about the state of democracy in Ireland? Be careful, subjective questions lead to subjective marking. You will have to do these types of questions, but make sure that your answer is relevant and clear and that you're backing it up. Moving on to the DBQ next, or the database question, it is recommended that you spend 50 to 55 minutes on this question. This is worth 150 marks, which is 30% of the subject grade. You have 2 documents to read and compare, and you will have 7 questions to answer based on these 2 documents. Some tips for the DBQ are to write short and concise answers, particularly for questions A to F, to use critical thinking to examine both documents, and to see positive aspects of them and then negative. Never take them at face value. Examine them to see how objectively they are presenting their information. Beware of potential bias. A charity or a lobby group will want information to be helpful to their case. They're not always the most accurate sources or the most objective sources of information. So for example, a women's rights group will want data that highlights the plight of women's rights, but have they looked objectively at the information or the method of collecting their data, or have they used the best information for their cause? When preparing for DBQs, practice is the most important thing to do. So attempt between 5 to 10 of these. What you will see then is a pattern in the questions asked. The following are helpful to remember. If you're asked a comment, give an informed opinion. If you're asked a critique, give a positive and a negative to the question asked. A presentation means you have to discuss the merits of the presentation of the data. Methodology refers to the method or manner of how something was created, so like a survey. Policy and decision makers are the individuals who make the laws, such as within a state. These types of questions want you to provide solutions or ideas for the policy and decision makers based on the documents. Limitations then are the limits or constraints of a survey or methodology. Another tip is to always specifically mention document A and B when the question requires it. So for example, if the question specifies that you discuss a question in reference to both documents, make sure to say in document A and then in document B and make your point. Clearly answering the question and signposting your answer to the examiner will always help to improve your grade. For question G then, it is worth 50 marks. So it's 20 marks for referencing the documents and, when required, another picture, quote or extract, etc., just referring to the required material, and then the other 30 marks are for your argument. So again, it's super important that you clearly answer the question asked and stay on topic. Signpost when you are discussing document A or B by saying, in document A it, whatever your point is, and in document B it states, and so on. Plus include references to the 3rd document that has been specified by the question. And again, make sure you're signposting this clearly too. And then finally, moving on to the discursive essay questions. You have 36 minutes for each of the 2 discursive essays. This is by far the most difficult part of the exam. You have to select and write an essay based on 2 questions, and you need to construct an argument for a question that is based on discursive essay question aspects of the course. Remember, the examiners are examining the course, not all of politics. You will have a good choice in this section, but make sure that you choose carefully. Choose questions where you understand what is being asked of you, and questions that you have evidence and a source to support your argument. Here are some tips for the DEQs. Your answers can be found in what you have covered in class. You will have covered anything that a question is asking of you, maybe not in a way that you might expect, but you definitely will have touched on topics that can be brought into your answer. Keep your answers concise. What I mean is that if there is a question on gender, there is a lot to say, but you only have 36 minutes. So plan your answer, set out what is easy to analyze, like a statistic on how many women TDs there are in the present Dáil, and build your argument from there. You do not need to know absolutely everything about a given topic, but you do need to support your argument with evidence, to analyze your evidence and to bring in a counter argument as well. Make sure you look at the sample answers for the DEQs on Studyclix for how to construct a DEQ answer. All the possible DEQs are on the course syllabus, but they may be highly disguised. If you know the course well, you will know what the question is asking, and if you don't, you won't. For each DEQ, know what your point or your argument is, what evidence you will use to back up that point, and what the source of the evidence is. Here are some topics that are really important that you know for the 2026 exam. Gender, media influence or control, etc., international agreements and human rights, Equal Status Act in a democracy, the social contract in a democracy, climate change and sustainable development, national policy and the selection of the executive, each key thinker. So use a concise definitions and key thinker guide for this, and a couple of sentences on each will suffice once you're familiar with each of them. And finally, integration and globalization in a democracy. Once again, please remember that these are predictions and not facts, so please do not rely too heavily on them, but definitely use them as a guide for where to structure your study. So there you have it. These are some predictions and tips for the Leaving Cert Politics and Society exam 2026. Make sure you subscribe for more Leaving Cert prediction videos coming soon, and all the best with your preparations.